I'm Jessie. I'm 19 years old. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved? I always believed in love, but it hasn't always been rainbows and unicorns. Not every story has a happy ending. Of course, I knew that first loves are rarely happy, but I couldn't even imagine that mine would end up going to the police and revealing a complete scam. My first love's name was Arthur. We met in school. He was really nice and chivalrous. Tried to date me. We were in love, but broke up just after 2 short months. I was deeply hurt and I felt lost. I mean, it's been 4 years, but I still think about him. We broke up because Arthur dove deep into studying, and his parents were against our relationship. His family wasn't really well off financially. His parents want him to grow up to be successful and rich. And in their eyes, I was a distraction. Why did I give up so easy? Very simple. One day he said, "Sorry, but now we can't be together anymore." And just like that, he slammed the door in my face. Hysterical, I ran away from his house. So 4 years have passed since we saw each other last time. My broken heart healed slowly over time. I lived up my life, made plans, and wanted to move to Europe. Until one day when I was scrolling through my Facebook newsfeed and saw a notification about Arthur's upcoming birthday. It's like I was struck by lightning. I went over to his page and started checking out our pictures together. I was overcome by memories and feelings. Have you ever missed your past? I decided to go to our favorite restaurant, ordered our favorite pasta dish, and then I got a call. It was Arthur and he invited me to his birthday party. I was shocked but promised to consider it. I got butterflies in my stomach and my heart was racing like crazy. Arthur said that he's way more mature now, realized his mistakes before and wants to make things right. I agreed because I still had feelings for him and really wanted to see him again. But of course I was afraid that he'd hurt me again. When the day arrived, I wore a stunning dress, put on my best shoes, called a cab, still being worried and anxious, and headed to the birthday party. I saw Arthur right away. He was waiting by the curb. It seemed like these 4 years never even happened. He gave me a hug, and my legs gave way from the excitement. We went inside the house, the music was blasting, and it was very loud from all of the people's voices. I looked at the crowd and was growing uncomfortable, but Arthur put an effort to make me feel at ease. He cuddled me and asked me to go into his room so that we could talk. Arthur was telling me about his time without me. In his words, it was a difficult time. His parents demanded that he had a 4.0 GPA so that he could get a scholarship. He said that he'd be able to get into college and even open his own small business, and that he was thinking about me this whole time. And now his goals were achieved. He couldn't deprive himself of the pleasure of being with me. We chatted for a while about how we'd changed during this time. Then we returned to the party. I kept catching his flirty gazes at me. First time in a long time, I was really, truly happy. After the party, we continued seeing each other, and after a week, Arthur offered to make it official again. His parents didn't interfere with our relationship anymore, plus college was over. We graduated. At first, I didn't want to tell my parents about my relationship with Arthur. I was afraid that they'd be pissed off. They could clearly remember how I was before and my broken heart and state of mind. We were finally enjoying each other. And then one time we were shopping together. Arthur took me to a jewelry counter and offered to try on a ring and earrings. I put the first ring I saw on my finger, when all of a sudden Arthur asked, "Will you marry me?" Of course I said yes. I know how to tell my parents. To say they were shocked from this turn of events is to say nothing. But they had to accept it soon. After a while, however, Arthur changed. I was nervous and thought it was my fault. I begged him to tell me what was wrong. It turned out that his business went under and he needed an investor ASAP. I found out the details and talked about it with him and offered my help. My dad's help, to be exact, right away. I begged my dad to give him money. I said Arthur had problems and he urgently needed a sizable sum of money. He'd pay it all back as soon as he had an opportunity to. Arthur jumped right into work mode. He did complicated calculations and was always busy spending time at work, at his desk. Even when we were falling asleep next to each other, Arthur was talking to himself about something in connection with his business, and I felt a little bit uneasy. My dad agreed to give him the money. That same night, we transferred the entire amount. My dad probably finally calmed down and suggested we have a celebratory dinner in honor of our engagement. And to strengthen their relationship, of course, he wanted to learn more about Arthur. During that evening, Dad and Arthur kept making fun of each other all night long. I looked at them and my heart filled with joy. I thought they really clicked. A little bit later, they were joined by my dad's business partner. Uncle Frank stopped by to give my dad some papers. My dad always treated him like a brother and a part of our family. I loved him like an uncle since I knew him, since I could remember. That's why Dad asked him to stay. He left later that night, though, and my dad took Arthur into the guest room. I went to bed in my own room, but later I decided to check on Arthur to find out about the evening. But he wasn't in the guest room. I didn't really pay attention to that fact and just went to bed. Arthur left in the morning, but in the afternoon my dad stormed my room absolutely furious. I have never seen him that mad. He said that the safe in his room had been broken into. The money that he was supposed to give today to his partner was gone. Of course, Dad accused Arthur. I wasn't able to say a word when Dad stormed out of my room and called the police. Police searched the house for a long time. I couldn't turn Arthur in, even though I suspected it was him too. So I said that he spent the entire night with me and only left my room early in the morning. I felt awful. How could I be such a fool? I believed Arthur again. How could he be a criminal? I simply just couldn't believe it. I headed straight to Arthur's house and wanted to find out about everything. He was watering flowers in the yard. He was grinning widely and seemed overjoyed. I hugged him first, but then I kept my distance. He asked me to wait for him inside. When I sat on the couch in the living room, I felt there was something under me. I searched with my hand under the couch. Nervously, I pulled out a bag full of money. I was shocked, despite having certain suspicions. I felt sticky sweat on my forehead. My hands were shaking, and my head was spinning. Money? Arthur? So it was him? I was empty inside. I kept replaying pictures of us together in my head and couldn't believe it. It couldn't be the truth, could it? I called the police and said that Arthur was the thief. It was the hardest decision of my life. I admitted to being in love with an asshole and told myself I just shouldn't hide it. Police arrived the same moment as Arthur was entering the house. He was astounded to say at the least. He looked at me and kept asking what was going on. I couldn't even look him in the eyes. I was pissed at myself for being so trusting of him. The police took the money and Arthur, and I called my dad, sobbing into the phone. I confessed that I lied to him and the police about what happened last night. Arthur was released in a couple of days. He drove straight to my house with the cops. The cops told my dad that Arthur wasn't the thief. The money was the profit from his business, and he was going to use it to repay my dad. My dad looked bewildered. He couldn't accept the news. He shook Arthur's hand emotionless and just patted him on his shoulder. It turned out that Dad's partner stole the money. He'd been committing embezzlement for 10 years. I remember Dad saying that someone close to him was stealing his hard-earned money. Police caught him randomly. His ex-lover who he dumped and broke her heart exposed him. Dad's partner broke into the safe himself, emptying out completely. Dad has been with his partner the entire time he had his business. These news were shocking to him. He trusted him just like himself and always treated him like a family member. After some time had passed from these events, we had a wedding. A band was playing and my dad got drunk and kept hinting about grandchildren. I invited all of my girlfriends. Friends were toasting, saying amazing words. I was so happy. You can't always see the real nature of a person behind a friendly mask and pretty words. But it's not the reason to believe in true love. If you like this story, definitely click and subscribe to my channel. Have a nice day!
Hi, my name is Stacy. I'm 20 years old and this story happened when I was in college. You know those stories about good girls and bad guys? Or about an unpopular guy and the queen of the school? You must admit that in life, everything looks very different from the TV series. But not always. Watch this video to the end and find out how a typical good girl got her bad guy, like in a school melodrama. I had a crush on Ethan since freshman year. This is my favorite type, called the bad guy who will never look at you. The worst part was that sometimes Ethan did pay attention to me. Well, quite occasionally, a couple of times, he noticed that I had gone to the barber shop or something. I could not understand if this was a humanitarian aid, a compliment to a girl with a lot of complexes, or was he just trolling? But it still made my heart flutter. Most of the time, Ethan hung out with some guys from the suburbs. He rode a bike to college. Although, rode to college was a bit of an overstatement. He didn't go to college very often. I even had separate holiday dates on my calendar. Ethan was in college today, and a separate black line every year. Ethan is trying to transfer to the next course. The fact was that every year they tried to kick him out of college, and every year, in some incredible way, at the last moment, he moved up to the next course. You 100% have been surrounded by such people, haven't you? While you are studying for days, this guy spits at the ceiling and then suddenly passes all perfectly, and you can only tear your hair and ask, well, how? Well, now I know how. This year, when Ethan accumulated a lot of missed assignments, he came to me with it so that I could help him as a friend. And I agreed. I don't have a life, but I'm not out of the woods and I watch TV shows. I knew this was my chance. I had no friends, relations with my parents, who stayed in another city, were strained. So I was all alone at the time and tried to think less about it. So there was no one to reason with me, and I moved from the polite ignore zone to the easy friend zone. We agreed to study in the computer class after school. Many of us did this. That was the first time I put on makeup in college. I felt myself fantastically stupid, so out of place that it was hard to even convey. I was very glad that at the last moment I came to my senses, ran to the toilet, and washed from my face everything that I had depicted there before. So we started studying together. Well, kind of studying. Ethan didn't do anything, and I knew he was taking advantage of me. But this was the first time we had spoken alone in 3 years. And he thanked me very warmly for my help, so I couldn't refuse. This went on 2 or 3 more times. But in the end, the celebration of friend zone ended. I was sick. With a firm, trembling hand, I wrote to Ethan that I wasn't coming to class today. To which Ethan complained that these were the assignments he needed to urgently complete and maybe he could just send me the tasks and I would do everything and send it to him. I almost agreed. It was only at the last moment that I realized that he would still be sending me his assignments, that our meetings would be over, and that I would just be left in the company of his disgusting essays and half-written tests. And I said no. That sounded strong, didn't it? I actually said, "No, Ethan, I can't solve them without you. Since I'm sick, can you just get to me? Moreover, you have a bike. Probably it will not be difficult." My neighbor, we weren't very friendly, did ooh, and she went to a friend's house for the night. I tried to argue that there would be no ooh, but who was listening to me? I was glad that I didn't allow myself to be completely turned into a free online tutor, and it took me a while to realize that I'd called home a guy I actually had a crush on, and I was in snot, depression, and pajamas. I flushed, and it had nothing to do with the temperature. What a shame. I ate a lot of antipyretics, threw away my paper handkerchief, and waited. Ethan arrived with a bruised face. Very bruised. I didn't immediately figure out where to put the ice. And he didn't explain anything to me. He joked that we both have health problems and dumped his urgent assignments on me and a bag of oranges. I was busy until almost morning. Too many tests and too sore ahead. And then Ethan took off and gave me one last joke about how smart I was, but took guys to my house at night, so I should be careful. And we didn't have any ooh like I thought. I spent half the day eating oranges and watching TV shows. And the more I watched them, the worse they affected me. Do you think that TV series about teenage love help a lot in real-life situations? Huh. They are hopeful tales, but very convincing if you are killed by unrequited love and uncompleted tests in sociology. I suddenly thought, what if Ethan really liked me? But then I told myself, no, it couldn't be. I was a nerd with glasses and no personal boundaries. So I decided to put Ethan out of my mind, think about my own interests, and do something about my missed assignments, which were beginning to accumulate because I helped this jerk with his study. The school year was over. I was a little down on the results, but not so much that my parents raised the issue of not helping me with money. Ethan again successfully crossed the line and also transferred to the next course. And then, when I even began to get it sometimes and not to think about him, he appeared on the horizon and offered me a bonus date. For my help, you see. I was confused and agreed. My heart was pounding like I'd drunk 10 liters of coffee. I was torn from to merge, pretending to be sick, to put on a beautiful dress. I even consulted a neighbor, and she again said her, ooh, and decided to leave us alone. It was terribly awkward. In the end, I gave up. I decided I wasn't going anywhere because Ethan wouldn't even think about me the next day. Again, I was wrong. Because late at night, my doorbell rang, and yes, it was Ethan. He was very joyful and said it was the first time he had been bailed on, and by who? Me. I asked him where he came from, and he said he remembered my address, and that I dumped him, and that now I definitely owed him a date. Well, I answered in the same tone that on our last date, he appeared with a broken face and did not explain anything, and how should I take it? Ethan fell silent. I was silent too. Finally, I firmly said that TV series were TV series, but I would not go on a date with a guy who did not tell me a word of the truth. Then Ethan told me everything. He said he was stupid enough to get into debt, and now he needed money. Here, even I with my crash tensed up. I thought that now he would start to borrow money from me, and even I couldn't be such a fool. But then Ethan said he had been collecting the money himself for a long time. I found out that he worked part-time at one of the clubs in a bad neighborhood. He said that he would soon collect the entire amount to close the debt, so the main thing for him was not to get thrown out of college, and that no one would tell his mother about these problems. He was very dramatic, so I took it down a little and assured him that I didn't know his mother. And of course, I asked him how I could help. It's Ethan. Well, you know. Ethan looked at me carefully, sighed, and said that until recently, he would have just borrowed money from me and not given it back. But I was so open with my crash that even he was uncomfortable. And anyway, this was the most idiotic date of his life. I didn't even offer tea. It was probably the right moment to fall into each other's arms, like in the TV series. But I was afraid. The guy owed someone a lot of money after all. Got into fights, lied. Bad guy was, of course, my dream, but not that bad. And I told him that the date would be when he got out of trouble and improved his studies, and I would improve my studies. Well, our first real date is tomorrow. Yes, This hopeless man had finally sorted out his life, though he had to sell the bike. And then he lived with me for another 6 months. For food. He's a really good cook, by the way. And he is trying to convince me that instead of a meringue dress, it's better to buy a new bike for the wedding. By the way, my neighbor said, "Ooh," when she moved out, and I added her in social networks. If we succeed, I will definitely write to her. I want it to be ooh at least once it was appropriate. Have you ever had a movie-like story? Tell us in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the videos you like. There will be new stories soon.
Hi, I'm Julie. I'm 17 years old. Has it ever happened that you immediately felt something bad when you met a person? As if you feel that you need to run away from him? I know it sounds weird, but I did. Watch this video to the end and you will find out what the inconspicuous teacher can hide. It all started with the fact that, because of my poor eyesight, my mother decided that it would be better for me to study at home. Don't think that I've become a recluse and have no friends. Since childhood, I've had a group of girls with whom we are still friends. We often go out together and have girls' night, so I don't feel alone. Even with my studies, I never had any problems, and I always studied alone. But the senior class came, and my mother decided that I could not cope on my own. My mother wanted me to go to a prestigious college, so she hired me a math tutor. I didn't like Mr. Sars right away. He was somewhat nervous and pale, and the material was explained in a low voice. When my mother passed us, he even twitched and started to blush immediately. But mostly, he was just a boring teacher who was preparing me for exams. Have you ever disliked a person at first sight? After almost every lesson, I told my mother to fire Mr. Sars and send him out of our house. But she insisted that I needed to study well for my exams if I wanted to pass them successfully and go to college, because education was so important. She always said that because she hadn't had a chance to graduate from college before, so she did everything she could to make sure that didn't happen to me. Of course, I agree with my mother. Studying is important. But this obnoxious teacher made me uneasy, and my mother was acting strangely. I once went for a run in the park next to our house, but I forgot my water bottle. I had to go back, and as I was approaching the house, I saw something from afar that I wanted to erase from my memory forever. My mother kissed Teacher Sars, and he got in the car and drove away. I just didn't understand what was going on. My mother and Mr. Sars? How was this even possible? My first thought was to run to my mother and ask her everything, but I didn't. I decided that I would not tell my mother anything, and I would start watching them. I just couldn't believe my mom was dating a nasty math teacher. I needed to find out how serious it was. I started paying attention to Sars and my mother, and I found a pattern. When I left the house, they immediately met and cooed sweetly together, just like doves. But when I was home and we were studying, they acted like strangers. This made me incredibly angry. I wanted to tell them to their faces, but the thought of my mother stopped me. I understood that after my father left us, my mother wanted to start a new relationship and be loved. But this teacher made me suspicious. So I wanted to somehow set him up. Maybe he was not who he said he was. So I had a plan. During one of our lessons, I put on a very revealing outfit, and my mother went to the store in the time. Everything went according to plan. I tried in every possible way to approach the teacher, to seduce him, but he did not give in to provocations, and was even afraid of it. When I sat down closer, he immediately sat apart and constantly wiped the sweat from his forehead. I could see that he was nervous and kept looking at his watch, looking away from me. After a failed attempt to provoke him, I decided that I would follow him to find out what he was doing outside of our house. But after observing Sars's movements for several days, unfortunately, I saw nothing suspicious. In addition to me, he was a tutor for several other families and after work went to the store and home. That's all. I was rather disappointed. I already gave up and was going to tell my mother straight out. I even prepared a speech that proved why they were a bad couple and why I didn't want them to date. But when I came downstairs, Mom said she had a surprise for me. At first, I was very happy, but then my mother moved away, and behind her sat the teacher and awkwardly waved at me. Now, I didn't understand exactly what was going on. This surprise got me freaking out. But then, my mother happily said that from today he would live with us. This was the last straw. I turned and slammed the door of my room. And what would you feel when a new man of your mother's appeared in your house who was a complete stranger to you? I was very angry with my mother. How could she do this to me? It was just not fair of her because we always shared everything. If she liked him, why didn't she tell me right away? I didn't let her into my room and I organized a strike, and I didn't have any more lessons with Mr. Sars. Just seeing him in the bathroom or in the hallway made me angry. So I sat in my room for several days and didn't leave it. This was my world where everything was good. I didn't have here this strange Sars who was definitely something, but I just couldn't figure out what it was. After a while, I came to terms with the fact that there was a new person in our house, but I still didn't like him and I often ignored him. Because of his work, he was often away from home, so it was tolerable. When he was at home, he cleaned, cooked, and tried to be nice. But at the same time, he was very strange. He didn't have many things, like he was moving out tomorrow. But my mother had blossomed and looked at him with such loving eyes. It broke my heart. It wasn't until later that I realized why he was acting like this. Once I went to a friend's birthday party with a sleepover. We had a great time, and for the first time in a long time, I was in a good mood. But when I got home in the morning, I noticed that Mr. Sars' car was not there. The door of the house was open, and my mother was not in the house at all. I got scared. I ran into the house and started calling and looking for my mother. When I went to her room, I found her tied to a chair and unconscious. Mom! I started to untie her, immediately called an ambulance, and we left. My mother was barely breathing. I was very worried about her and afraid of losing her. I was sitting in the corridor and I couldn't see anything around me. The doctor was about to come out and tell me what happened. At that moment, I even forgot about Sars and did not think about where he had gone. Finally, the doctor came out and said that my mother had overdone the sleeping pills mixed with alcohol, so she would have to stay at home for a few days. He warned that if something like this happened again, it could end badly, and she was lucky I found her in time. It was definitely not about my mom, and I began to suspect that Sars was involved. When we got home, I started asking my mother what had happened, but she was very weak and did not remember anything, only that they decided to have a romantic dinner. Everything went well. He kissed her. They drank wine. Apparently, he secretly used sedatives and, to be sure, tied her. I couldn't believe that my mother had been treated like this. And then, I remembered that there was a surveillance camera on the street side of our house, and I could see what he was doing. When I saw the recording, I was furious. While my mother was passed out, he took out all the jewelry, money, and electrical appliances. He just robbed us. I was furious. Now I realized that when he was acting strange and cleaning everywhere, he just studied where everything was. It turned out that he had robbed several other women that night. So the next day, we filed a report with the police, and they opened a case against him. My mother was depressed, because now it would be even more difficult for her to open up to men and find love. I supported her in every possible way, and was always there for her. But I was bursting with anger at this freak. I wanted him caught and punished, and I hope they will. Cyrus did not take everything into account, so the police tracked his appearance on the cameras and made a sketch, and my mother and I tried to describe him as accurately as possible. We gave the police all his belongings, and there was hope that justice would prevail. My mother and I began to forget about it a little, and my mother felt better. We didn't look for tutors anymore, but not out of fear. I just decided that I could handle it myself. If you have ever encountered scammers, then write about it in the comments. Subscribe to the channel, put likes, and be careful. Have a nice day.